Welcome everybody. My name, sorry. Welcome everybody. My name is Neil Faulkner. I'm the chair of the Cadastral Surveyors Licensing Board, if you don't know me. And with me today is Craig McInnes, a fellow board member. And the purpose of this webinar is to basically unpack the information about the new competency assessment update. We, as you know, you've probably all seen and hopefully digested the Competency Assessment Guideline that the board released on the 5th of March. This is a follow-up on that. And like I said, we'll be unpacking information in more detail very soon, together with an update on the timeline for implementation. There'll be time for questions at the end, so please use the chat function on the Zoom down the bottom to post your questions. We'll endeavour to answer as many of the questions as we can before 5. All the questions that we do answer online, and if we don't answer the call afterwards, will be on a Q&A, which we will endeavour to post next week. So this session is being recorded, as you've probably just heard, and it will be available later this week on S+SNZ's website on the Training on Demand section of that. And we will post the Q&A stuff on that Training on Demand later next week. So just before I hand over to Craig, a couple of little housekeeping things. Can you please keep your mute on and also your video off? That would be most appreciated. So I'll hand over to Craig now, and he'll take you through this webinar.
Thanks very much, Neil. I'm just going to share my screen and start the presentation. So hopefully you can all see that. I'd just like to add my welcome to that of Neil's. It's great to have a good turnout, and it's good to be able to start talking in some detail about the future competency assessment framework. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to start with looking at the competencies. They're the foundation of it all. So we'll have a little bit of a unpack of those. We will talk a little bit about some update on the nuts and bolts in the framework itself that have changed or we've advanced since the last time we sent out an update. We'll go through the different competency assessment stages and what the guideline has to say about those, talk about those. We'll have a quick look at the timelines going forward. And then, as Neil said, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So it's always really good to just remind ourselves of the big picture stuff of not only the competencies, but where they all fit into the whole scheme of things. And for the board, I guess the umbrella document that we're working under that we're very mindful of is the Cadastral Survey Act 2002. And Section 11, sets out the functions and duties of the board, which is to administer the licensing of cadastral surveyors, set up standards for licensing and relicensing, and also investigate and deal with complaints and particularly of professional misconduct. One of those functions of the board is to arrange or to conduct or arrange to conduct examinations for those who are wanting to apply for a license under these standards. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. The other big document for us is the standards themselves that were revamped in 2021 and that we're operating under. And we really, I guess the licensing standards under Section 11.3 have these two aspects to them that are really important for us as we've developed this competency framework. So the licensing standards must relate to the competencies required by cadastral surveyors to meet the standards set by the Surveyor General, And so that's, the survey rules and land online and doing cadastral surveys in terms of those requirements. But also the legislative requirements for the subdivision of land to the extent that they are relevant to cadastral surveying. And so those two aspects are really important. What we've had top of mind as we have prepared the competencies and this framework. You will all be familiar with Schedule 1 of the standards, where it sets out the 8 broad categories of competencies. And within those, there's a whole lot of sub-competencies as well. So the sub-competencies and as listed in Schedule 1 apply to all licensed cadastral surveyors, throughout your career. There's no change to that whatsoever. And that's, that's what your, when licenses are renewed and so forth, that's the competencies that are measured against. But the board recognises that for newly licensed surveyors that don't yet have that breadth of experience to be, experts across all the competencies, that there was a need to look at the critical sub-competencies that are relevant for those seeking a first-time licence. People need to be safe and competent to safely undertake cadastral surveys, but they don't, need to be an expert across all of them. And the analogy we've often used is the driver's licence. You sit a wee test, you spend a period of time driving, and you sit a practical at the end of it, and then you're deemed safe to drive on the road to get from point A to point B. You might not be able to back a boat trailer down a long, narrow, winding driveway, but you don't need to be able to do that in order to get a licence. And so that's the kind of approach that we've taken here. So the sub-competencies that we've looked at, they've been rewritten in a form that makes them easier to assess. They often start with a verb. And then we've taken them and matched them to the different stages of the framework to see where they are most appropriately tested. To give you a bit of an example from Schedule 1, we've got, accordingly, the competencies required in survey measurement are an understanding of functions and limitations of different equipment used for cadastral surveying and the necessity for regular calibration. We've brought that through into the Competency Assessment Guideline, and it says, describe, there's your verb at the start, describe the functions and limitations of the different types of survey equipment, how to use them correctly, and how to ensure they are properly calibrated. So it essentially says the same thing, but the second one is easier to kind of assess when it's been achieved. So you'll look through the Competency Assessment Guideline and in Schedule 1, and hopefully you'll see, a matching of the competencies, the relevant ones for a first-time licence, but they will be slightly differently worded. And just a point to note there that the board has always said all along that going through this process of revamping our framework may mean that we have to go back and amend the standards, and we're quite open to doing that, but that will no doubt be required. But we'd want to, finish the pilot, make sure that it's all working, and then go back and update that afterwards. So just a little bit of an update on some of the nuts and bolts of things that we have advanced since our last update last year. The first thing, hopefully you've all received a copy of this document here and are busy familiarising yourselves with it. We see this as an important one-stop document. It doesn't necessarily replace the annual circular because they're not like for like, but the annual circular will obviously cease to have any relevance beyond the end of this year and into the new framework. The two really important functions that it does is it identifies those critical sub-competencies for an initial licence and maps them to the different postgraduate stages of the framework, whether it's to be tested in the portfolio of experience or the professional challenge or the professional interview, or a little bit in all of them. So it kind of sets out those competencies and maps them to the right stages. And then it also states the evidence that applicants are required to produce to demonstrate their proficiency in that competency. So that's an important document that hopefully will direct you as you prepare for moving yourself through the competency assessment framework. So please get familiar with it and prepare your evidence in accordance with it. Most of the detail is in the portfolio of experience because that's where we need to give the most direction. And we've worked through those requirements with the members of the Survey and Spatial New Zealand Examinations Panel and Survey School. So that's why there's more detail there. And there'll be more information to come about the professional challenge and the professional interview as we work through the details of those with our advisors. And also the pilot, when we run that, there will be some feedback to come. So, the upshot is this guideline will be a bit of a live document for a while. So please make sure you go back to our website. It's currently under the news and publications page of the website, and get the latest authoritative version from there. We will obviously tell you all if there are changes to it. But, if you're not sure, go back and download the version from there. We've also been working on a digital assessment platform using Moodle. This is just an image from the landing page of that. And we worked through last year, we engaged a learning and assessment consultant company called Synopsys, and they helped us to prepare that. And we set it up for this framework, and we tested it with members of the Survey and Spatial Examinations Panel to kind of get rid of the worst of the bugs in it. So it's an online assessment platform that the applicants, the EC is the examinations coordinator, I'll talk about in a minute, and the assessors to interact with the framework and with each other. It's hosted by Synopsys Limited. And as applicants, you'll be able to go on, you'll be able to register with a name and an email, you'll be able to upload your qualifications and your projects and so forth. You'll be able to monitor your progress as you go along. You'll be able to receive communications from the examinations coordinator. You can receive requests either from the assessors or from the EC, and you can also receive feedback from your assessors as you go through. It's not available to everyone just yet because there's a few tweaks that we need to make, and we want to have the examinations coordinator on board before we kind of go live with it. But we're hopeful that there'll be an invitation for everyone to come on board in May and register with Moodle. This is just another image of the platform, and you can kind of see the different stages there that you would interact with as you move through the process. Examinations coordinator, this is a critical role in the running of our framework. There'll be someone who's engaged and paid for and contracted to the CSLB, and they'll have a lot of important roles. They'll be the main conduit of communication between the applicants and the assessment panel members and the CSLB, whether that's one-to-one or in a general sense. Administer the register of applicants and the Moodle platform, Working with the assessment panel to set the dates and venues for the different stages each year. Assess the academic qualifications that come in and check they're all good. Undertake an initial quality check on the portfolio of experience submissions and report to us on assessment matters, keep us up to date with what's happening. The position was advertised and closed on the 24th. We're working through a number of applications. There's some excellent applications came in. We're really pleased with the calibre there. And so we'll be working through those to make an appointment as soon as possible. In the meantime, Phil Napper, our secretary, remains our interim examinations coordinator. And if you've got questions about the framework, the new framework, etc., please keep sending them to the examinations coordinator email address rather than the secretary one, just so that we can kind of keep those two channels. And then when the EC is on board, they can take over that email and they'll have all the history of stuff there. The pilot, so we're wanting to, rather than sort of release this whole system to the wild, we want to run a pilot with a small group of diverse applicants, up up to 5. By diverse, I mean people from different types and sizes of firms, city, provincial, different qualifications, those sorts of things. So we're really we're not looking for the most experienced people to put on the pilot, but those who are ready and who have those diverse kind of backgrounds so that we can test the systems as best as we can. That'll begin in November 2025 after the October interviews have been completed. We can't run the 2 systems in parallel because we rely on our wonderful survey and spatial assessors to run both. But through that process, we'll be seeking feedback from the pilot participants and the assessors, and then have a debrief at the end. Again, we're really thrilled with the response to the invitation for those who've been involved. We've had 22 people put their hand up, which is fantastic. Sorry, we won't be able to take you all, but we will be notifying pilot participants later on this month, and they can start getting ready for that. Just want to talk now through the competency assessment stages and the 4 stages there, and the information that's been released in the guideline. Want to reburn onto your retina this image of our process, and it remind you that it's a sequential process. You start with an academic qualification, gives you your foundation for competence. Once you've got that background of theory, you get out in the workplace and you get a series of projects under your belt where you're able to demonstrate what you've learned and put it into practice. And then you move to the next stage, which is where you're tested to see what you really have learned in that period of time. And then if you make your way through all of those, the interview is very much a confirmation of that competence that you really are the real deal in that interview. And we believe that this is a holistic approach and a sound way to assess applicants for a certificate of competence, which will then go on to be a license. So under the academic qualification, which is the first stage, there are 3 options available. Most people will go through the compliant New Zealand or Australian qualification. At this stage, we only recognise the degree from Otago with a pass in Cert 457 or its equivalent. But as perhaps other universities in Australia get a qualification that we can have confidence every time, that may be added there. The second option is through a compliant qualification from outside of New Zealand, with some advice from the BAOQ that it's equivalent. That's the second option through, or for a totally non-compliant qualification with some extra university work, then maybe they would be able to come up to that equivalent level. So there's kind of 3 different stages there. When we open up Moodle, we would also be keen for people to, upload their academic qualifications and pass this first stage. It means that you're in the system, and then it means that it's much easier for us to communicate with you. If you go overseas, or you're not a member of a professional body, or you're not in a firm where there's an LCS that's getting updates from the board, it's sometimes hard for us to connect with graduates who might be thinking about getting licensed. But if you register with Moodle and you at least get through the first stage, then that means that your details are there and we can keep in touch with you as things change as we go along. So the qualification will be approved by the examinations coordinator. It doesn't need to go to the assessment panel for that. You're either got the quals or you haven't. And that's just a little snapshot out of Moodle there. So there you click on the applicable pathway, and then down the bottom there's a link you follow through, and you would upload your documents. The examinations coordinator would review the documents, and if perhaps you hadn't attached your transcript or something like that, then they could ask you for more information, and then once you've provided everything that's required, you'd be deemed to have passed that stage and you'd then be eligible to go on to the next stage later, which is the portfolio of experience. And this allows the applicants to present a portfolio of work that demonstrates their proficiency in the competencies. There's a number of elements to this. There's the work experience itself. So there's a minimum of 24 months of their total surveying experience. So that's straight out of the standards and nothing new. And that covers work that you do in all of those 8 competency areas. Of that, a minimum of 12 months needs to be on cadastral surveys involving subdivision of land and boundary definition. Again, that's nothing new, that's in the standards. So that's LT subdivisions, legalisation surveys, easement surveys, all the rest. It's the searching, the field work, the calc documents, the land online input, all of that sort of stuff. That's all part of doing a cadastral survey. And then we've introduced a minimum of 4 months obtaining and implementing subdivision consents. So you may remember under the current system, there's a period of time for planning and a period of time for engineering. This is not really comparable with that. But if you remember back to the two-pronged approach of the licensing standards about the legislative requirements for the subdivision of the land as far as it relates to cadastral surveys, this is where we see that it's important that a licensed cadastral surveyor, understands the subdivision process, and because all of those stages of it affect the cadastral survey. So that's preparing scheme plans and applications and getting 224 certificates and arranging services and all those sorts of things, and creating easements over those services and that sort of thing. So, so we're expecting a minimum of 4 months of experience in both obtaining consents and then implementing them as well. So they're not quite comparable to the previous planning and engineering timeframes. We've got a default allowance for a maximum of 6 months pre-grad experience if you were a qualified technician and you were working under an LCS. There will be other possible exemptions that on a case-by-case basis, applying to the board to consider other experience exemptions there. The time frame is calculated at 40 hours or 5 days per week, or 4 weeks per month. Now, this slide here is, it's a lot of words, but it's straight out of the guideline, and I just really do want to make the point here that they are minimum timeframes, and at the end of the day, you don't submit a portfolio of experience unless you're confident that it really demonstrates all of those the required level of proficiency in all the competencies. And you yourself also need to be confident that you're ready to be tested in the subsequent stages. So, those timeframes are a minimum. They're not the goal, they're a minimum. But at the end of the day, you've got to be ready with your portfolio and within yourself as well. So we've revamped the practical experience forms because they need to align to the new framework requirements. There's a schedule of practical experience. That's where you kind of put down the details. We've provided all of these as Word documents, Word templates. Then there's a summary of practical experience where it's a little bit like a CV. You talk about your role descriptions and the types of work you've done at each place of employment. You bring through your totals from the schedule, and it finishes with your attestation that all the information is correct and that your supervising LCS at that place of work also confirms that your information is correct. And there's also the applicant attestation to say that the covering reports and the projects for all your own work. So if you're going to apply for a certificate of competency under the new framework, you will need to be using these templates. If you've already filled them out and you're not going through the process this year under the current framework, you will need to add that information across. The authoritative versions will be on the CSLB website, currently in that news and publications section. So go there and download those. Here's just a little snapshot of the schedule. We've put quite a bit of explanatory notes to explain how to use it. Hopefully that is making sense, but if not, don't hesitate to ask. We're asking for a rural-urban divide and an office-field divide because that's really helpful context for the assessors. There's no actual minimum timeframes around those, but we are requesting that people provide that information. The 4 columns on the right-hand side, the office and field should add together to make up the total time that you spent on that project. The CS, which is the cadastral surveying time, and the SC, which is your subdivision consent time. If that project involved a cadastral survey or a subdivision consent or a 2 to 4, whatever, then you would identify the time that you spent doing that, but that time wouldn't add to your overall office plus field time. Okay, some jobs won't even have any cadastral survey or subdivision consent involved. So hopefully at the bottom, and when you get to the months, you're taking a figure for that goes towards your total experience. You're taking the second figure, which is going towards your 12 months cadastral surveying experience. And then the third column, or the far right column, is a figure that counts towards your 4 months of subdivision consent stuff. So hopefully that all makes sense. So there's a lot of information in the guideline around the selected work projects. So these are what you use to demonstrate that you've got the competence or the proficiency in the competencies. Again, the board recognises that the working environments and opportunities of applicants will be quite different. So we do want to give a lot of flexibility in the types of projects that you can choose. We've wanted to move away from prescription because, you know, with prescription, sometimes people don't quite have what's required and they've got to go through a dispensation. So I want to try and avoid that. So I really encourage you to talk with your licensed cadastral surveyor, make sure you understand the sub-competencies well, and look for projects that would be applicable. We've listed some suggested examples, and that's all they are suggested examples. But what they do is they indicate the level of complexity that we would expect to see. We don't expect to see a small empty lot, flat piece of land for a topo survey or a 2-lot subdivision on a 600,000 series plan. We give the flexibility, but the examples are there to give an indication of the complexity that we expect to see. A really critical part in all of this portfolio is the covering reports that you will write for each competency area, because they're critical for you to map how that project demonstrates the proficiency of the sub-competency opposite it. Some projects you'll find may cover more than one competency area, and that's fine. You know, you might do a big topo survey that then translates into a subdivision that then translates into engineering design or what have you, or services. So you may find that some projects can cover more than one competency area. And in some of the competency areas, there will be some mandatory projects. We want to see those there. But if those projects don't kind of tick off all the competencies, then there's some suggestions of other things, other types of projects that might do so. But you do have flexibility there. So talk with your LCS and make sure you understand what's required and look for those projects. Here's a bit of a snapshot from the guideline. It's just the land information systems one. You can see on the left-hand column there the bullet points of the sub-competencies. And then on the right-hand side, there's a suggestion of the types of projects that might be used to demonstrate those competencies, and then the details about the covering report that is required, what we expect to see in that, and the size of that report. So that's where we see this one-stop document. That's what you go to create the evidence that you need. And this is a wee snapshot out of Moodle. You take all your work experience forms, your projects, your covering reports, your attestations, create them into PDFs, and then you would upload them to Moodle. And you can see the different buttons there you would click on. And you can add that stuff as you go along, and it won't go through to the examinations coordinator. It's not until you've added everything, you then click on the last button, the confirmation button, and you say, yep, everything's there, it's all my own work, etc., etc. And then it goes through to the examinations coordinator. They will look through, make sure that everything's complete. If not, they will come back to you and say, hang on, you forgot to put that attestation in or what have you. And then when it is complete, it goes through to the assessment panel, who will then review all of the stuff in detail after that deadline time. The assessors can request further information if it's needed. And they can also, even when they accept it, they can provide some feedback for you, saying, well done on such and such, or actually you might want to brush up a little bit around, geodetic datums or whatever it might be. And that information will be available to you, and it will also be available for those assessors involved in the interview at the end, and that might be something they pick up on to talk to you about. So you'd be well advised to make sure you take on that feedback and get skilled up before you get to the interview. The professional challenge. So this is the third step, and the purpose is to independently test the applicant's proficiency in the competencies. So our intention is that applicants move, pretty swiftly through the process once your portfolio of experience has been accepted. But we understand that people's circumstances might not mean they can do that so easily. So we've allowed a 2-year period. Once you've had your POE accepted, you need to be fronting up for the challenge. At this stage, we've done quite a bit of work so far on the format of the professional challenge. It'll be held over a day. There'll be an exam approximately an hour long on cadastral law and the cadastral survey rules. And then there'll be a number of real-world scenarios to test the practical application of the competencies. This will happen outside of the Moodle platform, but the results will be logged on there, so you can see that you've passed that stage. And also any feedback from the assessors, again, strong in this, but weak in this area, you might still pass, but here's an area you might want to brush up a bit on. So it's a good way of providing some feedback for people in preparation of the interview, and that information will also be available for the assessors at the interview. The guideline outlines the sub-competencies that could be tested, and this should guide you as you prepare for it. Although a lot of them, hopefully, you will have just picked up by osmosis as you've worked in the real world, and hopefully a lot of those things you'll know and be able to apply rather than sit down and do a whole lot of study. It's fair to say the professional challenge will play a much bigger role than the cadastral law exam, and that they're not really apples with apples, because the challenge will cover all the competency areas. However, if you have passed the professional challenge within the last 5 years, you will be exempt from the 1-hour exam on cadastral law and the survey rules, and you only need to pass the real world scenarios part of the challenge. We're working through with the survey and spatial examiners, the School of Surveying rep and Synapsis, our learning and assessment advisors, getting together some good scenarios and working on that format. So any dramatic changes to that we'll announce to the community, but that you've got an idea of the kind of the format that it's going in, and the professional challenge will play that bigger role in testing. Which brings us to the professional interview. Excuse me. Which is, the purpose is to confirm that you're proficient in the competencies. There's the 2-year period since having passed the professional challenge. Again, trying to keep people moving through, but not making it indefinite. The interview will be conducted in person, so it'll be different to the 5 separate interviews one-on-one that you have at the moment. It's really about confirming you are the real deal, because the challenge is more onerous. It'll be conducted by 3 members of the assessment panel, and between them, they will all cover the competency areas as experts. And as I've said before, the portfolio of experience and your professional challenge results may inform part of that discussion. Again, this will happen outside the Moodle platform. but if any remedial work is required, so there's still that opportunity for a requisition. But when you finally pass the interview, the results will be recorded on Moodle, and the certificate of competency will be issued out of Moodle as well. The guideline outlines the sub-competencies that could be discussed in the interview, and regardless of what comes out of your POE or the professional challenge, there will be discussions around professional conduct, and communication skills will obviously be assessed during that as well. But we see professional conduct as something that's really important, and the interview, in terms of acting professionally and within your skill sets, and looking at making sure you're authorising work under your control, that sort of thing. The interview is a perfect time to really discuss through those things. And again, more details will come as we work through that with Survey and Spatial Examinations panel. So just a little quick reminder about the different timelines that we mentioned in the update. So the current framework being run by Survey and Spatial, we've got the exams, the interviews next week in Wellington. There'll be the final cadastral law exam held in June, and then the very final professional examinations interviews held in October this year. So that will be the end of the current framework. So if you're aiming for those either April or October, keep working through your projects and your work experience under that current system. Don't kind of draw across into the new. And the information about the current system remains on the Survey and Spatial website. Now, I just need to really make clear here that if you are thinking that you're going to go for April or particularly October, you really need to make sure and be honest with yourself that you're ready, that your projects are suitable and that your experience is sufficient. There's going to be quite a risk, that you'll kind of want to rush it and go in a bit uncooked. The real risk with that is that if you are so far uncooked that you fail, we don't have a provision to run another interview process under the current framework. So, and the only alternative will be to wait for the new framework in 2026. So I know that it's a wee way away, but it'll be here soon enough. But please don't go into that process unless you hand on heart are really ready to give it a crack. The pilot will start once the professional examinations have finished in October under the current system. So we'll look for that deadline for the submission of the portfolio of experience in late November this year. Be the summer for the assessment panel to look through that. And notification of acceptance will be in late February next year. Then the professional challenge will happen in March, culminating with the professional interview in April. We'll be seeking feedback on the framework and the Moodle platform from both participants and the assessors. And as I said before, any updates or changes that we make will be communicated to everyone, not just the pilot participants. And then once that's completed and the learnings have been implemented, the new framework will become operational. Applicants will be able to, everyone will be able to start. If you pass the academic qualification, you can then start to upload your other documents to the portfolio of experience in the Moodle platform. And the anticipated timeframes for the new framework going full will be in June next year, running through to the professional interview in October next year. So just to reiterate, apart from the pilot, there will only be one opportunity to seek a certificate of competency in 2026. So that's the end of what I wanted to talk about unpacking. I will just reiterate, you're going to have a bit of a question time now, but I will reiterate, even after this seminar is over, is keep the questions coming to the examinations coordinator email. We're hoping to prepare a bit of an FAQ, frequently asked questions list, for those questions that keep coming up, so that we can kind of preempt some of those questions as they come. Now, I'm just going to stop sharing and go back to Neil briefly, and then we'll start looking through some of these questions.
Thanks, Craig. I welcome everybody to post some questions in the chat box, and we'll work through as many as we can before 5 o'clock. Like I said before, we'll be doing a Q&A hard copy of the questions that are answered during this webinar, and if we don't by 5 o'clock get through them all, we will answer those that we haven't addressed as well. So first question, probably one for you, Craig. Can LTs that haven't been approved as to survey but are 90% done, i.e. waiting on external factors like planting, be used as the mandatory LT project?
Yeah, interesting question. Probably not. I don't think so, because the competency talks about having been able to undertake cadastral surveys under the Surveyor General's rules, and you don't actually know whether you have until that's approved. So I guess, you know, the easy answer to that is that the plan needs to be approved to really tick off that that competency. And you know, if it's 90%, well, what about 89? You know, it's actually much clearer and fairer on everybody if it's an approved data set.
Craig, second question. What if the supervising LCS did not have the full suite of competencies assessed during their competency assessment, i.e. no engineering project / assessment? Can they still supervise?
Well, I would hope that most LCS, you know, I guess with our revised requirements around the time and the competencies, that most LCSs would be operating in that space and be able to provide that supervision. And I guess it's something that's an issue now under the current system, and it's not just particular to the new framework. And so I guess that's a bit of a call for the supervising LCS to make, as to, you know, are they able to supervise their graduate in that particular project? Remembering, of course, signing off the affidavit for the forms, you're purely the LCS is confirming that you spent that time there. At this stage, we've removed that requirement for the LCS to say that the graduate is competent. That was something that we talked through the consultation process the other year. So that is a bit of a call for the supervising LCS as to but whether they can supervise, but remembering that the engineering requirements aren't as onerous as they had potentially been under the current system.
Okay, next question. I'm planning to take the cadastral law exam this June, and also considering sitting for the professional examination under the new system. I'm not ruling out the professional exam under the old system, but since the cadastral law exam takes a while to be marked, it leaves me with little time, if any, to prepare and submit the project before the last professional exam under the old system. Given this, what is the board's perspective on the transition between the old and new licensing systems? Would this be allowed?
I think the first thing you have to do is, at this juncture, make a call about which way you're going to go. And if you sit the cadastral law exam this June, that's great. That will obviously test you probably more broadly on the laws and the rules, and that will be great. But if you end up still going through the new system, you're still going to have to sit the professional challenge, albeit with an exemption. So there'll still be some preparation for another one. So it's your call whether you want to do the cadastral law exam and then do the new system. But I think the most important question you've got to ask and answer for yourself is which one you're going to go for. And I come back to my point that, you know, if you really think you're going to be ready for October and you haven't got the cadastral law exam, well then go for the cadastral law exam and and go for the October interviews, and then you're done and dusted under a system that you know. But if you're not confident you're going to get there, then maybe make that decision to go fully under the new system.
Will the professional challenge be held in one location, or will it be conducted regionally or in some other format? Perhaps I can answer that one. The professional challenge for the pilot will be held in one location, as there will only be 5 participants. Into the future, we are considering that it could be held regionally, possibly, or it could be held in some or other format. We're looking into the future at potentially doing the professional challenge in a virtual classroom type format. But that nothing's been decided on that yet. So the simple answer to the question is yes, it will be in one location for the pilot, and then at the end of next year, I suspect it will be one location, but it may be regionally, just depending on how many applicants there are and where they're located, etc. But we'll make a decision on that later. Next question. Hi, for going to the cadastral law exam, what we need to submit to proof already 10 months working experience?
Yeah, so again, if you're wanting to sit the cadastral law exam under the current system, and the current system requires proof that you've been working for 10 months, then that would still apply. We don't want to kind of start hybridizing the two systems or making dispensations on the fly. You know, carry on under the current one if that's your preference and you're going to be ready, or else make a decision to go under the new one. And the Moodle is coming out this May. Yeah, it's 95% ready. We just need to do some tweaks, and we'd prefer to have the examinations coordinator on board so that they can get the hang of accepting registrations and dealing with academic qualifications and that sort of thing. So yeah, certainly this May is our intention.
The next question, moving forward, how many examination staff interviews will be held each year, 1 or 2?
Yeah, good question. In our consultation document, we kind of, in our final document, we settled on at least 1. Obviously, we are reliant on our wonderful assessors, examinations panel to be prepared to offer more than 1, particularly on the professional challenge. There's quite a lot of work involved in doing that well. The board's desire is that there would be 2, so that there is plenty of opportunity for people to come in. But certainly for next year with the pilot and then running the thing for the first time, there'll be only 1 full intake. But until we've worked through that with Survey and Spatial and just kind of worked at efficient ways of doing things, we can't categorically say, but we would love to be able to do it more than once if possible.
Question, the 1-hour cadastral law exam in the new system before the real world challenge, what's the difference between it and the old one this June? Perhaps I'll answer that one. The 1-hour cadastral law exam under the new framework is going to be a condensed version of the current one. It'll just be more focused on particular cadastral law and rules aspects. So that'll be the difference. Next question. You mentioned the possibility of claiming up to 6 months of pre-graduation work experience. Could you please clarify what documents are required to initiate this process?
Sure. So if you go to the guideline document that we sent out where it talks about practical work experience, there's a bit in that table where it talks about this area, and on the right hand side is the evidence that you need to provide if you're claiming that. And that's basically you need to still fill out the same experience form, need a copy of your technician qualification and a confirmation by an LCS that you were under their supervision during that period of time. And so that will be, we've given an automatic dispensation for that. If you meet all of those requirements, the dispensation is automatic, and you would just submit that with your other forms when you're uploading into your portfolio of experience. If you're wanting to claim more than 6 months, or there was something different about your experience that you perhaps you didn't have a technician license, whatever, you don't meet that, then it would need to be a case-by-case basis with the board. You would approach the examination secretary and say, this is what I want to do, and they would lead you through the process there.
Okay, next question. The guidelines offer detail for the content of the covering reports for each competency. I'm wondering what the submission of the individual projects would look like. Will they, oops, sorry, my thing just jumped. Will they be similar to the current project reports?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the desire is that people are using stuff that they produce as part of the project as they've gone along anyway. But so there will be a lot of information that you will need to submit around that project, so that the assessor can then look at it, read your report, have a look at the project and see, oh yeah, I can see how they've done their check shots and proved their that there's a QA checklist for their e-survey or whatever. So it's about providing enough information to substantiate the claim that you're making about meeting those proficiency and those competencies, and neatly tying across to your covering report. So it could well be similar to what you provide at the moment, but we're hopeful that most of it will be stuff you produce as part of doing the project, and then you're collating it together and uploading it to the Moodle platform.
Okay, next question. It's fair to say the requirements under the new criteria are not as onerous as those current. Do you intend to release documentation to guide RP serves or LCSs to ensure they move with the times?
That's a bit of a... Hoping it wasn't, less onerous, but hopefully at the right level, and still providing, good quality cadastral surveys coming out. So at the end of the day, there was nothing wrong with the cadastral surveys coming out. Hopefully, it's more aligned with the competencies that we expect. Around documentation RP serves, that's something that's a survey and spatial title. That's nothing to do with the Cadastral Survey Act. And we are, as far as our LCSs are concerned, at the end of the day, we are reliant on them providing that training and mentoring for graduates through. And so, that's why we've tried to create this clear document that lists the competencies as well as the evidence required. So it's very clear what an applicant has to do. But yeah, we can certainly look if there's a need for LCSs to be educated on what's required. It's a good idea. We could certainly look at doing something like that later on.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I think we'll close the webinar. Like Craig said, if you do have any further questions, etc., please direct them to the examinations coordinator at the board, and we will answer any of those questions, and we will also provide a written Q&A of the questions we've answered on the webinar. So thank you everybody for your attendance. I hope it has enlightened a few of you and given you something to think about. And have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks.